Next on the list is public comment. Due to the current circumstances in our community regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, our Board of Education meetings are being conducted virtually. Because of this, members of the public who wish to submit a comment to the Board of Education meeting had the opportunity to send an email prior to the meeting. With that being said, there was no public comment. Next on the list is board communications.
The approval of the agenda.
Oh, approve of the agenda, my bad. Approve of the agenda is first. Michelle, second. Scott? All those in favor? 6-0. Next on the list is board communications.
You received additional information today that was not included in the original electronic packet.
I'll make a motion to place all appropriate board communications on file with the district clerk.
So we motion, we need a second. Rich. Also in that board communications is the Herkimer BOCE's meeting minutes from January 14, 2021, as well as HHH's artwork update. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? 6-0.
I had a question about the BOCES.
Well, we just accepted it.
You didn't ask if anybody has anything to
Oh,
say.
Well, you can still accept.
Go ahead.
We're just
No,
going
it's just a general question.
Yeah.
Extracurricular budget. What is the, I know what ours entails, is it similar?
Yeah, they have a National Honor Society, and they have like CTE program honor societies that do things. They go to competitions for culinary and things like that. I think my daughter, when she was in the different BOCES, they went down to like Tennessee, so they had to raise money for their different activities, just like they were here.
Any other questions? We're all good with that. Next on the list is approval of the minutes for the regular meeting, Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. Get a motion for that. Scott, second. Michelle? All those in favor? 6-0. Next is the special meeting, Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. Get a motion for that. Michelle, second. Rich, all those in favor? 6-0. Next on the list is Oneida BOCES school lunch update by Kate Dorr.
Welcome, Kate.
Hi, I'm just trying to get my camera on here. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I've done this Google Meet before, so bear with me.
We got our tech director here to help walk you through it if you have issues.
She's good.
I'm getting a phone call.
I'm good. Okay, can you all see the slide that says school nutrition services? And you can hear me. Okay, great. So I'm Kate Dorr. I have met some of you in the past. I was the assistant food service director with Tom Pfister for 11 years and just took over as director of our school nutrition services last January, just a couple months before the pandemic started. So it's been a great first year, as you can imagine. So I have presented on different things in the past to everyone. A lot of times, sort of the fun things that we're doing, and we are still doing some fun things, a lot of farm to school work and working on more fresh fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing. But I wanted to just talk about today how we handled the pandemic and what it might be looking like going forward. So immediately in March of 2020, we shifted to serving remote meals. And the USDA allowed us to go from serving meals under the National School Lunch Program and the National Breakfast Program to serving meals free for all students 18 and under the Summer Food Service Program. So that's an advantage to us because it's free for everybody. The reimbursement rate is a little bit higher than under the National School Lunch Program and Breakfast Program. It also allowed us to serve grab-and-go meals, serve meals at specific times instead of like breakfast at breakfast time, lunch at lunchtime. We were able to serve them both at the same time. And your district has been incredible since day one at helping us get a distribution mechanism in place so that we were able to meet the needs of the Herkimer community. So immediately we set up 6 distribution sites, and the district assisted us in delivering to several households within the community. I think we had teachers helping, teacher aides helping, administrators helping to be able to get the meals that our kitchen staff had prepared out to all of the students in the community. The elementary school kitchen team was really in charge. They were the ones working on site at Herkimer. And from March of 2020 to June of 2020, they served over 61,000 meals between breakfast and lunch to all the students, which is really incredible considering everything that was going on last March, how quickly it all had to change, and how they were able to adapt. And I'll tell you, both kitchens are wonderful staff there in Herkimer, but the elementary school has not ever once said no to me. I've asked them crazy things to do and to try to achieve, and they are always more than willing to try anything that we ask. And I'm just very appreciative of them, the staff that are in your buildings, and then your district staff for supporting us in that way. Then we moved sort of from the school year into our summer feeding program in the summer. Now, typically we serve meals partnering with the summer rec programs at the town and the village. And of course, they didn't have any in-person summer rec programs. So we continued our grab-and-go model at the 6 summer sites. And just for some comparison, it's really, really impressive. I hope that you are as well. Usually we have 2 summer sites. We only serve lunches, and we serve about 2,500 meals in 2019. In summer of 2020, we had 6 summer sites. We served breakfast and lunch, and we served 42,508 total meals. It's incredible. I mean, the need is clearly there in your community to have free meal programs. And so I'm really hopeful that this is something that we will be able to continue. I think that we possibly have a friendly administration right now that might continue this into the next school year. So I'm very hopeful. This is just a picture of the meals staged to go out. We got those coolers, the BOCES program, 50 coolers from a No Kid Hungry grant that we were able to utilize. Coming into this current school year, we're continuing to serve free breakfast and lunch to all students. We have been serving weekend meals when possible, vacation meals when possible, take-home meals, remote meals. Every way we can try to think of to serve the kids, we have been. Overall, the average daily participation is down from what's typical, but especially at the high school, we don't have all the students in the building. The kids at the elementary school are taking the meals home with them. So some of that, I think people are, just opting not to participate, which is normal and consistent with what's happening in our other buildings as well. This is a picture of a 5-day meal kit that was sent home over February break. It has 5 days worth of lunches, 5 days worth of breakfasts, all frozen in a nice complete box, served with a half gallon of milk, 1 per student. So we're looking to possibly do that for April break as well. I just wanted to do a little bit of a comparison so that you could see. This top graph here is average daily lunch participation. So as you can see, blue is this school year and red is a normal school year or last school year. Our lunch participation is down significantly. But what I thought was very interesting is that the breakfast participation is up significantly. And I think this is 2 things. It's free for everybody. So at the elementary school where they are delivering breakfast to classrooms, and some kids previously maybe would have had to pay, it's free for everybody. So every class is basically getting enough breakfast for every kid. And that's really helpful in our meal counts. And then similarly at the high school, middle school, the students are ordering, and then around 9 o'clock, our kitchen staff is bringing the meals to the students in their classroom. And I spoke with the manager there today, and she was explaining that, kids will order the meals using some kind of Google form. And then even despite having that in place now for however many months we've been doing this, they'll show up to a classroom and the kids didn't order, but they still want a breakfast. So we're able to serve them extra meals. So overall, if you look at how many total meals are being served between breakfast and lunch added, we're not down significantly because so many more breakfasts are being served. And even though the meals count is less, the reimbursement is higher for the summer food service program for all of the free meals than it is in a typical school year. So financially, it's not terrible, which is good news. I know that everyone is really struggling this year, whether on a personal level or a district level or a BOCES level. Funding is certainly a challenge, and really we're doing just about as well as we can hope. We're definitely looking to break even as a program with a small profit that we'll be able to return to Herkimer and facilities usage fees, similar to probably last year, which was lower than traditionally we've seen. But we're going to continue to push meals for spring break and for summer, and serving as many meals as we possibly can. That's the more reimbursement we can get, the better financial standing we'll leave our program in the end. USDA has extended free meals through September 30th. So we will definitely want to serve this summer. What that's going to look like will depend on if there are in-person summer programs, if we are going to do a daily pickup versus a weekly or a couple times a week pickup. But we definitely have staff that want to work, and we have food that we want to serve, and we're going to serve as many meals as we can this summer. That will really set us up for success for next year. Right now, the expiration is September 30th, so I'm hopeful that we can continue the free meals into the fall as well, and then switch to whatever they determine is normal October 1st. So that's a lot of just sort of general background information. Does anybody have any specific questions?
Kate, would you be able to forward that PowerPoint on to Susie so she could have us all get a copy of that?
Absolutely. I had every intention of having it ready ahead of time, and it just did not happen. So I will certainly send it to you now.
No problem. I appreciate it.
In terms of the fiscal shape, you said it wasn't awful. Do you think you'll run a deficit or a surplus this year?
Well, the way that the school lunch program works, and you may be familiar with this, so I'm sorry if I'm telling you things you already know, but we have an A fund, which is the COSER that you belong to. And that is distributed amongst our schools based on participation. So that's all of our central administrative fees. And then we have a C fund, which is all of the actual day-to-day operations of the 15 districts that are part of our program. So we're looking to not run a deficit. Any profit that we have at the end of the year gets redistributed to the districts based on, again, participation. So if you have a high average daily participation, you're charged more in the A fund, but then you also have a bigger facilities return at the end of the year. So, it's looking like we're right on track where we've been other years, the past couple years. So it'll probably be a bit more than last year, but less than probably 2 years ago of what we're looking to pay back to the schools to turn a profit.
Okay. Thank you. Diane?
Hi. I just wanted to ask, and perhaps this isn't for the lunch program proper, but did we collect applications for the free lunch or reduced lunch program this year? Because that's also an indicator for the school.
We have been collecting them, and we've also been running the direct certification list, which we get from the Department of Education. It's all the students that are automatically qualified because of Medicaid or the school supplemental nutrition assistance program. And definitely the return is not anywhere near where it has been other years. If that is data that your school is looking to use, my guess is that they'll look at last year's, whoever they is. But if we want to do a last minute fall push on getting applications returned, we definitely can do that. You know, that's something I can talk about with whoever would like to do that. We can send them home and just ask everyone to fill them out. And then you would have a little bit more up-to-date, accurate information.
Well, other people can decide whether or not we need that data. I just know that that's a metric that you
Right.
all can see for all the schools, and that's also a comparison from school to school. So if we don't know what the other schools are doing either, I just wonder if this year just isn't worth the data because we know it, would be off year. So I'll leave that for other people to decide.
It's definitely an important number because it factors in terms of whether you're a high needs district or low, like how many, but a lot of that's done by the direct certification number and not necessarily the application number. So there's a balance here. And I do think that people are aware that the data is skewed right now for any of that stuff. So I think when locally you can look at when Central Valley went from being went to being a CAP program where they considered all children free because Community Assistance Program, or I can't remember what the CAP stands for, I should know. But they had trouble getting the applications back because once you say everybody's free, nobody wants to do the paperwork. So it's a similar thing here. So I'm sure the application rate is down across the state when they go to free. And certainly I think that when that happens, the state's aware of it and then they have to make accommodations for how they calculate. But we can make a push. I'll talk with Regina and Kate at some point to figure out whether we should try to get a better picture. I can't believe we're lower free and reduced right now than we were 12 months ago. That wouldn't make sense. But potentially though, with the tax breaks that are coming for people, it could shift a little bit because I'm not sure how that's going to play in with the tax credits and in terms of students in poverty and those kinds of things. So it'll be interesting to see over time here how some of those numbers change.
Any other questions for Kate? Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you all so much, and just really thank you for your support through all of this. Herkimer is one of my favorite districts to work with because you have such great participation. So I appreciate everybody's assistance and help and look forward to working with you all some more in the future.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the list is business reports.
Looking to acknowledge receipt of items A through I, that's treasurer's report through capital project change orders update.
So we get a motion on that. Diane, second by Michelle. Any discussion on that item, or those items? All those in favor?
Looking for a motion on budget transfers over.
Get a motion on that. Rich, second. Scott? Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? 6-0.
Looking for a motion on disposal of surplus items, agenda item K.
Get a motion on that. Michelle, second by Diane. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? 6-0.
Looking for a motion on the capital fund account closure resolution.
Got a motion on that. Scott, second. Michelle? Any discussion on that item?
What is the amount that's left?
I mean, it's not in the resolution.
I didn't see a number in there, but that doesn't mean it's not.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. But what was left over from what was in there is transferred to the debt service account. I'd have to go back and,
Yeah, there's not a number in there.
yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it wasn't huge. It was somewhere under 30,000, I would guess. It's really just a mechanical thing because once that project's over, we submitted all the paperwork, we can't do anything with that project, and we closed that out last year and then closed the account, and then all the funds that are left get transferred. But I'll get the number for you.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
It's a good question. I always ask good questions. Looking for a motion on item M 2021-2022 People Transportation Contractor Board.
Good motion on that by Rich. Second. Scott? Any discussion on that item?
Any significant issue changes? Differences?
From this, so there were two bidders, Bernie Bus and Durham. And we gave you the backup for what the prices were, and there was a pretty significant difference between the prices between Bernie and Durham. And Bernie Bus was the low bid. We had them bid in 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year increments, and Bernie was the low in all three. You guys can only approve a 1 year contract, but we can put 5 years before the voters and include it in the budget lines, in the line by line budget, and in the budget plan fit that they're approving a $5 million school zone Bernie. And if the budget passes, then that 5 year contract is approved. Otherwise, it'll just be the 1 year contract.
So they lock into a 5 year if we pass the budget.
Correct. And what that does is it gives us a steady, it's basically a 2% increase a year on the contract. So we know exactly what transportation is going to cost us, as long as transportation needs don't change. Because if this is bid on a certain number of runs, basically 20 runs. So sometimes you might have less runs, it'll go down, or more runs, it'll go up.
So we're voting based on the 1 year.
You're approving the 1 year and authorizing us to put the 5 year into the budget.
And if they approve that, that supersedes the 1 year.
Right, and then we'll submit that budget language to SED along with the RFP, and then the budget, and then that RFP will be awarded and that contract will be approved at SED for 5 years. And we won't have to do anything else for 5 years, other than make adjustments because of the number of runs.
So this actually is approving 5 year.
What's that?
This tonight is actually approving the 5 year.
No, it's approving it for 1 year, and then we put the language in the budget for 5 years, and if the budget passes, then it's a 5 year contract.
Regardless of cost.
Yes.
That's typical.
You can only approve a transportation contract for 1 year. You take public action to do it for 5. More than one takes public action. So if we approved it for 1, then next year we could wait and see what CPI is, and we could extend it for another year at CPI. CPI would be probably somewhere 2% plus or minus 1. Although again, there's some things happening right now in the economy which indicates we could have some inflation, and CPI could be well above 2 over the next 3 or 4 years with tax policy and the pandemic. You release a lot of money into the economy, and then that means there's more demand that can drive up prices. So there's things that there could, but 2% seems.
So why is the lock in for 2% for 5 years?
I mean, or if I'm wrong and it's 1%, we lost 1%. If I'm right, then I don't see a huge downside. Like, it's never going to go down. So 2%. The CPI might be 1%, so you're off 1% 1 year, but it's going to probably be more than 2% a couple of years too. So in the end, you probably at least break even, if not do better. And then you're locked into a contract for 5 years where both of you can't really kind of back out of it. That kind of makes us a steady state. Does that make sense?
Yep.
There was a couple of Zach, Miss Pear guy, we had a consultant, Regina and I had to go and score the ERPs, and that was about 3-4 hours. I don't know, Mr. Abbey probably was for all the walls. I had to attend another meeting while I was doing it, but it's it's slogging, the RFPs are about that thick and takes a long time to go through them, and you gotta score them on a rubric and find everything, and it's a pretty interesting process. Thanks, Mr. Abbey. Thanks, Regina. Thanks, Ms. Perry.
So, any other discussion on that item? All those in favor? 6-0.
Looking for a motion on item N, State Environmental Quality Review, seek a resolution for the capital outlay project next year.
Get a motion on that? Leanne, second by Scott. Any discussion on this item?
It's like the tax levy thing. I'll ask you this every year because it never sinks in, but this is just basically saying it's environmentally sound.
Essentially, so there's no environmental impact because we're just going to be reconstructing something that already exists. So if you start to build an extension on the building, like if we put a bigger gym in or something on the backside of the building and started to cut into that, there might affect waterways, and it's probably going to be type 1 work. When you do work inside your building, it's usually type 2 work. Outside your building, can be type 1 work. So like if we do the bridge project where we got to get in that creek, that's type 1 work. There's clearly environmental impact. So type 2 is easier. The review process for type 2 work is a lot easier. It's much simpler. And this is just switches, cameras, and that kind of stuff. It's not anything. It's just like what we did this year at the high school, but next year we're going to do it at the elementary. And it's a matter of just constantly replacing switches, replacing access points, and then with the cameras, replacing them, getting better resolution, just keeping everything upgraded. And we get 93% aid on it, so we spend $100,000, but they give us 93 back next year. So it's really kind of a win-win for the school. And that again, that capital outlay project only gets approved if the budget gets approved. It's important. So if we ever had to go to a contingent budget, if the budget didn't pass, then the capital outlay project doesn't pass.
Okay. So this is a roll call vote. So Ms. Fisher, what's your vote? Yes. Mr. Mihevik?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Gilbert?
Yes.
Mr. Tucci?
Yes.
And Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 6-0. That's funny.
Could you see my Facebook?
Oh my gosh.
This is my annual budget presentation, and usually I've done one, at least one by now, but I haven't done one this year, so you guys have all been surprised with my multiple.
That's why we're all here tonight.
My multiple presentations of nearly the same thing. And I swear I left this right at the top of the presentation, but I come back and it's in a different spot. Technology. And these computers are really slow. There we go. So let's see. Let's share.
No, don't share. Just press present.
Just press present?
Yep.
Oh, there it is, present. Got it. 2021-22 budget presentation, March 17, 2021. First, we'll take a look at enrollment. Our elementary enrollment has stayed relatively similar from last year to this year. It's about a little over 470 projected for next year, and it was about 470 this year. But if you look at what it was in 1920, it was 565. So we've dropped almost 100 kids in a year. Now, some of that probably is due to some homeschooling. Some of it's probably due to kindergartners maybe not coming to school this year because of COVID. So I'm not really ready to say we dropped 100 kids permanently yet. I think we got to kind of wait and see what happens at the elementary. So part of why we were able to go every day in person this year is because of that drop at the elementary. If you think about it, also this year we did virtual pre-K, so there's actually a little bit lower than that in general. If you look at the high school enrollment, that's staying pretty much steady Eddie in the middle of the 500s, 50 by 50, pretty steady. was 575 this year. Looks like it's gonna drop down to 559 next year projected, but that's pretty close to the same, and those aren't hard and fast numbers in those projections. And again, I think you probably have some kids in homeschool right now, even at the secondary level, that might come back next year. So we'll have to take a look at that. But that number really isn't a significant drop. The 100 at the elementary is certainly a significant number. The budget numbers, bulk numbers program looks to increase by about 738,000, or about 4%. Capital looks to go down by about 14,000, so relatively it's basically the same. And the admin looks to go up by about 4.1%. For a total increase of about 818,000, or 3.3% for projected budget. Capital highlights. Debt service decrease of about 45,000. That's basically that's our payments on the capital projects that we've done in the past and that we are paying down. That's going down by about 45,000. Other minor changes about 14,000. Those are in summative, so they're not really worthy of mentioning, but they're in the line by line that you all received in the folder that was shared with you by Susie. There is a line by line where all the specifics are, and you can see code-wise where the changes are. Salary increases about 20,000, benefit increases about 25,000, so the net changes of down about 14,000 in that component. That component also contains the capital outlay project, which we already talked about. Do you have questions about that, or? Administrative component highlights decreases Board of Education about 25,000. That's due to shifting to a part-time clerk predominantly. Increases in business office about 26,000. Salary about 31,000 in the component, benefits about 23,000, and administrative BOCES costs are up by about 35,000. And that's largely due to our enrollment. Although we've seen some drops, our enrollment, or our WADA enrollment, is actually staying pretty steady as far as the state's concerned. When you look at the enrollment, and Sandy, Ms. Sherwood tried to explain that to you, that our WADA is actually higher than our enrollment because certain types of students count more than one, and so you can have a decrease in enrollment, your WADA can stay relatively flat. So even though we've dropped a bit, and other districts have dropped more in our region, so we have a larger share of the administrative cost, and that's mostly why that administrative cost went up as much as it did. In another year, our WADA might go down and it might drop. So there's some randomness to that, but it says that we are relatively keeping our population stable. If that elementary enrollment trend is real, and as those grade levels age up, we will see a decrease in our high school enrollment over time. Frankfurt Schuyler was the same size as us when we thought about merging in 2010, 11. All three of the schools that we're going to merge with Ilion were around 1,100 kids plus or minus. And then Ilion was about 1,600 kids. And then since then, Frankfurt Schuyler has dropped to about 900 kids. We're still just a little under 1,100. So relative, you can see around us, these schools have shrunk. And our elementary class sizes are starting to look like Frankfurt Schuyler elementary class sizes do now. And they're a school of about 900. So that could be a number we're approaching. West Canada was 900 not that long ago. I think they're down under 800 now. So there definitely is a decrease in population of students in the valley. And you guys can stop me at any point in any of these slides and we can talk more. Administrative budget. I still think that, long term, we are light some positions, and you may or may not have people that are going to be willing to fill some of the roles, and we might need to start to think about administratively fleshing it out a little bit. Combined business office and superintendent position. Some districts not much bigger than us have an assistant superintendent doing a lot of curriculum work. So there's a lot of positions that are kind of not filled right now that we kind of all stretch ourselves to fill. The athletic director position, assistant principal position, they were both separate positions in 2011. They're not anymore. And that again are you always going to have a Mr. Condon or a Ms. Paraguay that's willing to do both? And can they really do them well all the time and for long periods of time? It's a question. Administrative demands, annual professional performance review has not gone away. We're still doing them. We're still observing teachers, I'm still observing principals, and it's still going on. And it's still a pain in the neck. I mean, they'll attest, it's hours and hours of work to go through the process for each teacher. Digging for All Students Act, I would say DASA complaints are probably down this year. Discipline is probably down across the board because we're just less dense in classrooms. And there's no, at the elementary, there's no lunch, there's no recess. And those things where the kids are in big groups and running around, running into each other, getting scuffles. The buses are 22 kids. Transportation is probably a third of the problems that you have in the school in terms of discipline. So with that density of students being down, it's definitely brought that down a bit. I'm sure administrators are thankful for that. I don't think they could have remained sane without at least a little bit of relief in some area this year. The New York State ELA and math standards have not gone away. The tests kind of have, or at least the penalties for not doing well on them as a district are gone, but they're not gone. And the federal government seems to have no interest in making them disappear. They will be back, I think, in brute force soon. They're going to be lighter this year, probably less days, less time, and there's not going to be a lot of accountability attached to them. But we got to be careful with that because they say there's no accountability now, but in 3 years, this data is going to be used for something. They're not going to just take the data and do nothing with it. Next generation math and science standards, required local improvement plans. I'm almost guaranteeing we're going to get into some of that plan stuff down the road for excessive absenteeism or chronic absenteeism, probably underperformance in several of the subcomponents. Because there are so many subcomponents, it's almost impossible not to end up on a list where you have to do an improvement plan in one of them. And pandemic protocols, they're a beast within themselves to enforce them, and I think schools run safely under pandemic protocols, and we don't really know what the protocols will be for next year or probably even for next month. I think there's a lot of flux right now. Major component changes in the program. Materials and supplies down 14,000. We shifted to central stores in both buildings, and that's been a really big savings for the district. Teachers don't order pencils on their own anymore. We order pencils in the central store and then they come get them. That's really been pretty effective in cutting our material and supplies costs for the district. So we're not saying you can't have pencils. We're saying we don't want everybody to order 500 pencils and have people only use 30 of them and order 500 pencils every year. So now if you have a central store, one thing that's happening is they're using some of their back supplies and they can come get the supplies they need. So they're still getting all the supplies they need. We're just doing it in a more efficient way, and it's pretty cost effective to do so. Contractuals down 14,000 for various small reasons throughout the component, nothing major. Transfers are down 5,000 because of, I've seen a trend in reduced transfers needed for special ed costs in the summer over the last couple of years, so I reduced that to match that reduction. Estimated increase in benefits costs in that component, about 193,000. That's health insurance, TRS, ERS, health insurance, I said health insurance, Social Security, those kinds of things. Salary increases estimated about 283,000. That does include restoration of some positions that we didn't fill in this budget year. BOCES increases about 233,000. The bulk of that is new special ed placements out of district for high need students. We've seen our special ed our program costs grow for high needs out of district placements grow from about 700,000 in 2011 to almost 2.2 million now. So we had an increase in out of district BOCES placements from 39 to 49 from last year to this year. So we have a huge increase in those out of district high needs placements. So it's costing us quite a bit of money. One thing you should know is that when those costs exceed 32,000, we get 90% of it back. So there's a separate aid line for high cost special ed, but you have to pay the first 32,000 100%, and then everything over that, 33,000 somewhere in there. Everything over that, we get about 90% of it back.
Is that per student?
Per student, correct. So if a tuition is, let's say, 38,000, then we pay 32,000, and then the state would pay 90% of 6,000. And then if there's other services like speech or OT or PT, all of those would also be added to that tuition cost and then stacked, and you would get back 90%. So there's kind of a ceiling cost for out of district placements. Private placements, which we have only about 7 of, the ceiling on that, the cap on that is 7,000. So we pay the first 7,000, and the state pays 90% of everything above 7,000. So those costs are mostly paid by the state, so they're actually less costly to the district. So again, those two aids come back to us in separate pools. I'll show you them in another slide where that aid comes back.
We don't have the services we need to support the kids, is that why it has to go out?
Well, when you have students, and we can have, Michelle can come in, Ms. Bloss can come in and do a presentation about what some of the services are that we get from BOCES. Well, you have particular needs for students, like there's particular disabilities that we don't have specialized programs for, like autism and certain types of students that maybe are not very mobile, which is really difficult for our systems to handle. So certain times when the handicapping conditions are very severe, and we need out of district placement. Sometimes the social emotional issues are so severe that, you know, they need a placement that they can't be in the radio setting. So those are settings where, those are programs that are unique or, you know, would make sense for us to do it. See, if we were to build our own autism programs, then we would have to hire a lot of staff to do it, and it would be less cost effective. It's always a question of, can you fill the class? Or can you get the high enough percentage of the class that you pay the cost? And a lot of these programs are spread over 12 grade levels and they're specialized. Does that make sense? But that is a question we should be asking, and I've been asking, is like, where I'd rather have students here, because students that are here are much more likely to graduate. The less the students in our schools, the lower the graduation rate. So success rate. So once a student leaves our system, the probability they graduate is probably about 50-50 in terms of versus 80 or 90%. We're about 90% in the general ed population in school. So it's about 90% of the kids in school, 50% if we send them out. Now that's not really a very fair comparison, because you're dealing with people with kids with severe handicapping conditions. So, but my thinking and the state's thinking is always keep students as close to home as possible, as long as you can, because it's the greatest chance of graduation is to keep them as homeschool. And it has nothing to do with cost. It has everything to do with success. Anything else? Program highlights: restore social emotional support position. We did end up cutting a position this year in this model that we didn't fill when someone left. We want to restore that position. We want to restore in-person physical education next year, restore in-person music, restore extracurricular and interscholastic athletic programming, continue our agriculture and STEM programs, 21-22, hopefully in person, restore part-time driver education, continue the Cal Drive program, continue the Project Lead the Way program with Frank Schuyler, continue VP Tech, 7th cohort. That might be the 8th cohort, I'll have to check that. Restore and expand community use of facility. I want to get back to students, our youth sports groups being in our facilities if possible. I want to be able to allow the community potentially to use the pool, to use the new athletic weight room and fitness center. All of that should happen. However, the last bullet says, reopening regulations still pending. Am I going to be discouraged from having visitors in the school next year still in terms of our reopening? I don't really know. I'm going to prioritize in-person instruction over all of that, but I think it's important that we try to get back to as much normalcy as possible. Elementary school program highlights: restore physical education, restore a full day in-person pre-K, restore music, restore after-school swim instruction, continue summer programs, implementing new ELA program, maintain appropriate class sizes. And that's appropriate. I've changed from maintaining class sizes because I think we need to look at what is the appropriate class size for the next year, 2 to 3, in terms of gap closing and making sure that students get what they need for all that they've lost over the last 14 months of having badly disrupted instruction.
How do you do that?
What's
How do
that?
you come up with that number? I'm assuming you're thinking smaller class sizes to bring kids more to speed.
Right, what is the appropriate class size? That's a negotiation between me, the principal, to some extent the teachers, in terms of what services they can provide to kids, how much differentiation they can do. It's an open question. So to me, as I start as a manager, or if SED is going to say classes should have 30 kids in them, and I'm going to say, well, 30 kids in 1970 maybe, but 30 kids in a school district with 70% free and reduced is maybe not the right size. So what is the right size and what grade them? So typically we try to keep our K and 1 classes as small as we can. And then as they get older, we maybe let them get a little bit bigger. And the right size in a typical year, I would say the best size for me for elementary is like somewhere in that 18 to 22 range. 25 maybe up in the 5th grade, 6th grade, maybe you can do that. But you start to get to 30, it's difficult. I mean, this vote would be the better one to think about that. But I think 18 to 22 is kind of the sweet spot for an average. What do you think? And then smaller, maybe kindergarten, 15, 16 would be better because they're just, they're pretty high needs, coming in.
Yeah, but you're kind of referring to the fact of what they lost over the last year.
Yeah.
How do we even know that?
Right, but we'll talk more about gap closing, and some of them might have to do with smaller class sizes, some of them might have to do with other programming, and some of that's going to depend on how the state distributes funds, and that's in a later slide. So what I really have done in this budget presentation is take what the governor said and said, here's how I'm going to open school, return it as much normal as possible, being cognizant of trying to close gaps in some way with the funds that they're giving. But the federal government really wanted to give us more money so we could close gaps. But the way it's structured right now, they're really just subtracting money from the state money and giving federal money as far as the governor is concerned. But if they didn't do that, then we could probably create some extra programming to meet kids' needs. But that'll be difficult without the funding that's supposed to come to us from the federal government.
So the money is in for extra staff.
Yes, extra staff, extra programs, that kind of stuff. What does that look like? What do kids need? What training do our kids, or do our staff need to understand what they need? Special education, increase enrollment in high needs programs is it's really something we've already talked about. I want to hit it again. We want to try to continue a shift to least restrictive environments so that we keep kids in place as long as we can. And again, reopening regulations are still unknown for next year. And that impacts special ed in terms of what their choices are. One of the things that was written into the regulations is that there's, some choice in that in terms of what their program is going to look like and making sure that we can still provide them the services. So we're going to see what that looks like. Technology maintained. In the past, I said build one-to-one computing environment. We are in a one-to-one computing environment now. Continue our sequence of BOCES aided multi-year purchases. And again, reopening regulations are still unknown. What kind of technology will kids need next year? Probably about the same as this year. Now that we're in a one-to-one environment, it's probably going to change the way people look at computers and how they interact with them in the classroom. In terms of Google Classrooms, presentations, homework, assignments, communication with parents, all that stuff has evolved. And I don't think it's going to all go away once we get back to being in person. I think a lot of the communication, there's things that are happening right now that are better than pre-pandemic. And some of that stuff I want to keep. We want to keep it. Yeah. And what options does the board have in terms of taxes? You have 2 options in terms of taxes. You can propose a budget requiring a tax levy limit that's at or below the tax levy threshold prescribed by law, and it requires a simple majority or 50% plus 1 vote for approval. Option 2 is to propose a budget requiring a tax levy that is above the tax levy threshold prescribed by the law, and that requires a supermajority or 60% of voter approval. It also requires a statement on the ballot indicating that the required tax levy before exemptions exceeds the tax levy limit. This year, the tax levy limit is $9,010,000 approximately. There should be a 0 there. And let me explain to you what happens. So this year's tax levy is $9,451,000. And then you do some arithmetic because there's a property tax growth factor, which the state gives us of 0.37%. Then you got to subtract out your pilots. And then you got to subtract out last year's capital exemptions that we're paying this year. Because remember, we're talking about next year's tax levy. Then you got to multiply by the allowable growth factor, which is 1.23% or 1.0123. Add back in your $35,000 in pilots. And your tax levy before exemptions is $8,714,000. This year's exemptions are only $296,000, which is down considerably from last year's capital exemption. So when I add them back in to get the tax levy limit this year, it's $9,010,000 approximately, which is down about 4.67%. So this is a year in which there's a negative tax levy limit. CVA, this has happened to CVA twice, where because of their debt service payment structures after the merger probably, and trying to get debt equated or somehow stabilize it, their payments, they ended up with negative levy limits. So the tax levy limit for next year is actually lower than this year, which is strange. It's kind of an anomaly. State aid for this year, which I think I know less about state aid right now than I did a month ago, because the governor is a little bit politically weakened. The Senate and the Assembly both passed budgets which were significantly different from the governor's proposal. So I'm still using the governor's proposal for aid because I don't have anything specific from the Assembly or Senate yet, and then usually something different is going to come out of it anyway. But using the state aid estimates from the governor, if you look at what they do, the aid, it looks to be about flat from last year to this year. Notice that the aid, if you look at the first total aid line, it's 14,194,000, and the first total aid line for, excuse me, it's not flat, sorry. The first total aid line is 14,612, but then underneath that there's a pandemic adjustment. This year they took away 517,000. Next year they're planning to take away $1.4 million. So state aid is actually down about $500,000, excuse me. So then we go to the next slide. Then if we take our state aid and we actually do a 1.99% tax levy increase, which is a tax levy limit override because it's a negative tax levy limit year, which we talked about at the last board meeting. And we factor in other revenues, and we factor in what this governor says he's going to give us in federal aid, which is $1.544 million. Then our total revenue is $25,123,000, which leaves us about $870,000 gap from what the expenditure budget was to what the revenue budget is. We could either use fund balance to close that, or we could cut something from the budget. So that was the presentation. This is the numbers that I think I gave you kind of as a highlight at the last meeting. Around those numbers, I think it was a little bit more fund balance that I was using in the last meeting than this one. Questions?
Pretty significant amount of fund balance, right?
Last year we used 1.1 million. This year we're using about 230,000 less to close that gap. And we didn't need to use, and one of the things that I updated you guys last February was because the state made all their aid payments and they said they weren't, we didn't need to use the 1.1 million in fund balance that we appropriated last year in anticipation of the aid cut. So we have that fund. We basically are using less of that money that we appropriated last year. So we'll have a little bit extra from that amount. Does that make sense?
We don't know what total we use from this school year yet, right? Until close out of the school year.
We won't use any fund balance this year.
Any of the 1.1?
No.
So we went to a use of a zero fund balance for this current school year.
Correct. And that's because they made us whole with in the initial budget presentation, they told us they were going to cut 20%. And I think that what we did was we underestimated aid by about 5 or 10%. So that's why we kind of underspent our budget a little bit, and we had a refund, the health insurance refund that was larger. So we made up the difference.
So our fund balance going into the next school year is high.
It could be. But they're also talking about legislation to let us be higher than 4%. I'll get to that slide too, for what the fund balance is. So federal aid, the key thing to understand is that I had 512, but I think it was actually 517. They gave us 512,000 this year, but they took away 512. So we really didn't see any federal money this year. the state basically took it out of the state aid before it came here. So, but that helped keep our state aid flat as opposed to having a $500,000 decrease. The governor's thinking, well, I would have taken away $500,000, but I gave you this federal money instead. So that's another thing. We weren't sure whether we'd actually get that money in the end. We did. This year, they're going to give us about 1.544 million, according to the governor. It might be closer to 2 million in the end. They just haven't given us the numbers yet. The Office of Budget was about to release them to SED, and then it was stopped by somebody. I don't know who, but somebody stopped us being able to know how much actual money there was there. And this does not include the 3 million or 3 to 3.5 million that the school district is supposed to get from the Rescue Act that just passed. So that money hasn't been released. That number is probably somewhere between 3 and 3.5 million that the school district will get. That's a one-time funds that can be used between now and 2024. But the question is will the state actually give us the money, or will they take away 3 million and give us 3 million? Federal, take away 3 million of state funds and give us 3 million. So really our net gain next year is about $120,000. And that's really the only real change in state aid for next year. And again, it's what is that 3 million? What does that $3 million mean? And I can't know until I see what the state aid is going to be. And the big difference between the Senate Assembly and the governor is the governor is directly supplanting, meaning he's taking away state aid and replacing it with federal aid. The Assembly and the Senate want to allow the districts to receive the funds and make them whole in state aid. So it's the two budget plans right now are completely different. I mean, massively different, like probably $5 to $6 billion difference between the Assembly and Senate plan and the governor's plan.
I didn't realize they put in Senate plans.
So,
I didn't realize they put in Senate plans.
so you have the executive budget in January, then you have the one House bill from the Assembly, you have the one House bill from the Senate, and then the one House bill and you have the single House bills, and then they combine for one. And then the governor, the Assembly leader, the Senate leader go in a room, smoke some good cigars or whatever they do, and they come out with a budget, and the smoke goes white or black, and then they declare, oh, that's the Pope, sorry. And then they have a budget. This is one of the most, probably least democratic budget processes on the planet, the way it's done in Albany. And it's been done that way since Alexander Hamilton. Like it's Albany's been corrupt, or not, excuse me, I didn't say that. Albany has had issues with that kind of power imbalance, and it's just gotten worse. The governor has incredible power in the budget process. So we don't really have any idea what's going to come out. So what I've done is basically said, I think I'm a very conservative estimate on state aid. There's some things that we probably want to do to close gaps, to hire more staff, to offer programming. But I think the only way we're going to be able to do that is if some of the federal aid at least is not supplanting state aid. And we'll run those programs off the federal aid outside of the school budget. So it won't be passed here. We'll have federal money, hopefully, if this all plays out right, for 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24. So we can run some programs off the F fund, outside the aid fund budget that we passed, to hire extra staff to do gap closing measures, small class sizes, after school programs, summer enrichment programs, summer recovery programs, and that type of stuff, and internal programs to train staff. But we wouldn't be able to, we couldn't afford to do that much of it right now with the way that this is forecast. Does that make sense? Because if he takes almost all the 1.5 million away in state aid and only gives me 100,000, 100,000 is not a huge amount of programming to add to next school year. When health insurance goes up by 220,000, and salaries go up by 250,000. So it's like, between those two things, that's not enough money for me to be able to go out and hire another social worker to do outside counseling and to have a small group AIS outside the school building, or a 6-to-6 program or something like that, where kids are getting all kinds of help within the day. So there's like a lot of things that are going to become clear between now and April 14th, I hope. But this is kind of like, I think we can do what we need to do to get open next year. We can come back to some semblance of what we were before the pandemic in terms of a lot of the offerings that we have. But I don't think without changes to what the governor wanted to do, I'm gonna have a lot of freedom to do a lot of extra stuff. But I think we need to do a lot of extra stuff. But we just gotta get the federal money that we deserve and not have to go to the state and build some bridge out in Western New York or downstate.
I just don't get the whole thing though. The money from the federal government was supposed to go to the schools, it was earmarked for the schools, but yet it comes to the schools with federal money and then the state monies get taken away. It just blows me away. I know it's like that every time, but it just blows me away.
So when I did my lobby day with all the area, like, I mean, that was my spiel to them. I mean, I do what I can. I talk to them, and our Assembly and Senate are on board. They're solidly behind NATSA planning, giving us the money. It's not like we're going to buy a yacht. We're gonna hire social workers. We're gonna hire teachers. We're gonna hire some fun youth athletic programs potentially in the summer. I don't know, because these kids they need conditioning. I mean, if you look at it, it's been 14 months, which has been harmful to their physical health, their mental health, their educational health. It's across the board. We need the money, and they need the time, and they need the investment. It's really crazy to just, it's like siphon this off and let it go to some other project. Like, I think our kids are our most important investment, and we got to focus on that. Let's hope it happens. I think I might have. Gap closing, so gap closing, I think there are things we need to do. We need to assess the learning loss. We need to implement gap closing programming. We need to implement summer programs after and before school programs. We need probably extra special ed services to make things up. But the only way we're going to be able to do everything that we need to do is if we get the federal funds we deserve from the federal government. We need those funds. I can't do it in the aid fund in the significant way that we need to do it and plan for it and to make up for what's happened to our kids. Tax levy history, back in 11-12 was up 10%. Typically it's been somewhere between 2 and 4%. We're proposing 1.99%. The only thing that makes this an odd year is that the 1.99% is a tax levy limit override.
And that's a 60%.
Yeah. Last year when we went out at 4.49%, we got 64% approval. So my thinking is that even if we go out above the tax levy limit, as long as the percent is under 2, we'll probably get above 60%, unless you guys think differently.
I just think it needs to be explained that it's an override, but it's an override on the negative end.
Yeah, well, that's what we have Christian for, to make sure that story, and CBA is successful both times that they did it. So I think you get in trouble with a levy limit override when you're going out for like 10%, 15%. I think if you say 1.99%, it's just because it's a crazy rule. But I think they get it. A lot of people don't read the actual pamphlet either. A lot of people just look at what the number is. If it's under 2, they probably don't pay much attention to the rest of it. Or if there's like controversial cuts, and we're not really proposing any significant controversial cuts in this budget. It's pretty much either restoring positions or keeping positions at this point. Over time, some of the enrollment trends might even need less staff, but we would hope to be able to do that through attrition. Plus, if we're going to be able to, if we have extra staff, maybe there's ways that we can use them in terms of gap closing. Keep classes small or offer extra programming. So $870,000 budget gap, lobby your legislator to increase in foundation aid. That's one of the things that is very seriously being talked about right now by the two houses, which is to fully fund us. Right now, we're about $30 million under what we should be, which is probably about 30% under. And we've been under for about 10 years, a little more than that. So the state really owes the district about $30 or $35 million at that time. You know what's funny? You know, if this was me owing that, the comptroller would be all over me. I don't ever see the comptroller all over the governor about him owing me $33 million. Where's my $33 million? But there was talking about closing fully funding foundation aid in 3 years. So to like make it up by a third. Well, if they did
Not
that,
historically, just going forward.
no, they're not gonna get, we're not gonna get the 30 million. I'll settle for the 3, because if they were to give us 3 million more and then increase our foundation aid at a steady 2%, if over the next 3 years they got us to where we're supposed to be, and then did like a 2% increase every year after that, I think the district would be in fine shape for a decade. I'm not saying I can't promise for everybody, a decade or two where there would be no issues. But we've been struggling since, before 2008. Now we're in a little bit better financial position, but, with aid reductions and things like that, we could be in trouble again. And the thing that scares me a little bit is if they use supplanting, then people think everything's okay with that federal money. But if the state's supporting me with $1.5 million a year in federal money that's only going to be here for the next 3 years, when that $1.5 million goes away, if they don't have anything to back it up, we're in trouble. There's like a funding cliff. And that's what happened in 2012, in 2011. 2008, you have the fiscal crisis. 2009, the Obama administration passed the, what was that relief plan called? It was like a $900 million relief plan that bailed out states and local governments. And that money flowed, just like this money's flowing, it flowed to the state gave it to the schools, but then they subtracted. So school districts were kept whole in 2009-10, 2010-11, and then 2011-12, there was no federal money anymore. So those gaps were very difficult for school districts to replace when the federal money went away. So school districts didn't really start to strain and lay people off until 2 or 3 years after the fiscal crisis of 2008, because they were bailed out. But then the state had no plan to backfill that federal aid at the end, and it was a train wreck for like 3 years. Then they fixed it a little bit, and now we're back on that same spot. So we're trying to head off that problem. We can use fund balance to close the gap. If we did use fund balance to close that gap, it would still be about a 20% reduction in how much fund balance we used last year. We could reduce the expenditure budget. We could raise taxes more than 1.999%. They should have raised the tax levy more than 1.99%. But I kind of set that line tonight. I don't think it's safe for us to go out at any more than 1.99. We could go out at less than that, but I don't know that in terms of budget passing. If we go out at above 2 and we're doing a levy limit override, I think that'll be a problem budget for us. So I don't think we should do that, unless you guys tell me different.
Doesn't sound like we need to.
No, I don't think so.
If we need to, that's fine.
Right. So, especially with all the federal aid that's flying right now, if in 3 years the federal budget falls away and the state's in trouble still and there's a problem, that's when I think we have to build the story that we do need to raise taxes. And the reasoning is the federal money went away, the state money went away. Do we want to keep our school or not? And the only place left is school taxes. But it's also planning prudently over the next 3 to 4 years so that we're not in that spot. Fund balance use. So you can see our fund balance use is ranged between probably about 250,000 to 1.1 million last year.
Which we didn't use.
No, we didn't actually use it.
So then we hire going into next year.
So then if you look at the summary, last year, our unassigned fund balance was about 1 million. Our reserves were about 2 million. And I put a number in fund balance for next year at about 2 million. That's unassigned fund balance. And our reserve should be around $2.43 million next year. And that's all estimates, but I'm pretty confident that we'll end the year in a spot around there. We talked with our auditor about whether he would write a finding on the 4%. And one of the things that it's really going to be difficult over the next 3 to 5 years is trying to live within that 4% fund balance. So we may carry a balance higher than 4%, but with explanation that it's because we just feel that the state has been unstable in terms of whether they're really gonna provide us aid. Last year, they said 20%. I mean, they were seriously threatening to take $2.6 million away from the district last year. Those kinds of changes are just so huge that a 4% fund balance can't necessarily carry it. So that's something we'll project. We can finalize that later in the year when we know better when we're better where we're gonna finish. But under the current budget that I proposed to you, with fund balance use that I projected and where we're at, I still think we're gonna find, and this year in okay shape, because the state basically did not do any of the reductions that they said they were gonna do. And we've run a little bit light in some positions, so we're a little bit ahead of the game. Questions? So important dates, we're gonna finalize our budget April 16th. Budget hearing, May 5th, 6 p.m. Budget vote, May 18th. Budget revote, if necessary, June 15th. The one caveat that I do not want you to know is that we have shifted the time to 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. because a lot of the districts are end a little bit earlier and county votes can be a little bit tricky. And I don't know if you guys have any objection to 12 to 8 versus 1 to 9. There's hardly anybody votes after 8 anyway. Usually we're sitting around for an hour watching it over. Then nobody will be wondering whether the budget passed, because last year I think we didn't get our results back until the morning. Yeah. Thank you for your support. And I just had one thing for the superintendent update tonight, because I knew it was going to be long. I got a lot of stuff that I can talk to you about, but we'll do some of that in April. I did want to talk to you guys about return to in-person instruction, because I know that's on a lot of our minds. And I know that if you saw the headline today, that Oneida County has issued some guidance about return to in-person instruction. I just wanted to kind of remind you where we're at. Grades K through 6 are in person every day, and they have been since September 3rd. So the day's a little bit different, but they have been in person every day. We haven't closed for them, and they've had school every day since September 3rd. 7-12 is hybrid since September 8th. The things that have put us in hybrid at 7-12 are social distancing, PPE, and transportation. Those are the hurdles that there really isn't any relief from us yet in the regs to get to students every day. We all want students every day, and there's a big debate over 6 feet versus 3 feet, and masking versus barriers and those things, and whether barriers are even really allowed in a general sense, whether barriers really are for when you can't avoid it. So if you were running a lunch line and you had a cashier that had to take money from you, then you put a barrier, because they have to get close enough to touch the dial or take money from you. So they're the barrier. But you're really not supposed to put people next to each other all day under 3 feet, even with like that kind of barrier if you can avoid it. Does that make sense? Like that 3 feet when possible. So schools have interpreted so that some schools might interpret it that you can in some spots, but our local health department has never said yes. Our county has not issued any statement saying yes, and I've pressed pretty hard. I got to know, but I haven't also got to, yes, this is okay. So, I was thinking face shields instead of barriers, because then they're wearing them all the time, and they're in the hallways they have them, so that would be good too, but that's not allowable. So 3 feet with a barrier, but then there's like all kinds of caveats. So I'm not convinced necessarily that the barrier works. And I haven't really seen New York State schools functioning with barriers. I mean, I don't know that like they make announcements, but I want to actually go to a school that's operating with barriers and see it.
Actually, Oneonta is doing it, but just at lunches, and they put up cardboard barriers between the students. Only at lunches though.
And that's
So like if I'm sitting next to Johnny, who's sitting 3 feet away from me, they put up a cardboard barrier between the two.
What are they doing in classroom?
There's a 6 foot social distance. I'm just saying in the cafeteria, so that they can get more kids in the cafeteria. That's how they do that.
So one of the things that I've been talking with admin about was potentially moving our desks back into the school over April break, even though we're not necessarily gonna have kids back, so that, and then just space, but then still keeps kids socially distanced, because you don't put kids in every seat. But now now we've got our desks back in the school. Does that make sense? Because that's one of the huge things. Like that's a week for me to probably get all the desks back in the classrooms from the storage containers out back. And then I sent you guys, I think there was like $74 barriers, but then I think we can get also like $16 barriers. So the purchase and the lead time is not huge. But I also don't want to spend even $2 on barriers if in 2 weeks, the CDC is going to say it's 3 feet and with masks, which I'm suspicious they're going, because the barriers frankly are a waste of money. Like they're not doing anything for us. The only thing they're doing for us is they're getting kids in the door. But then from a safety standpoint, like if I set a glass barrier like a tripod like this on the desk, and my friend's over here, I turn and it's like so we're doing it just to open, right? We got to understand that, like and the kids aren't like they're gonna go from room to room. I think somebody told me that the kids some schools have to carry the barriers. That's just crazy too, that they're carrying the barrier because they can't share them. So some of this just seems so crazy that we would do it. I mean, and I sound like the Rome superintendent. I think this is such a way. It's going to cost Rome like $500,000 to do it. Some such number. That's the number I think they're throwing out there if they want to do it. And I don't think he wants to spend $500,000 on barriers
That might be used for a week or two.
that are going to end up as a relic in the museum for a week or two.
But a $2 waste of money is certainly better than $74.
Yeah. Well, we've got it down to like $17, I think, a barrier. But it doesn't have the Velcro things that make it stick on the desk. You know, the 74 one is kind of a little more heavy duty install. Probably, you know, the thing I worry about with middle school kids is those barriers are going to be on the floor like constantly. They're just knock them off their desk. They can't even keep their pencils on their desk. But it's just I don't want to spend $1 on it. But I get it if it gets kids back in school, maybe it's worth it.
What we talked about in that meeting was what's our drop dead date to get them. But actually, back then, we talked about getting desks in the schools over the break, and then a delay of about a week after break to get them in. Is that what you're thinking?
I'm thinking we can probably. Jim said they had them on hand at the one company he was looking at, but that was a little bit more than 6
No, I mean, as far as students go, so desks, and then a week later, potentially students after break.
desks in, and then when we can, we're ready. I'm not saying I'm not going to give you a date tonight. I'm just saying if I get the desk in over break, then I'm ready to just put barriers on the desk and we could have the kids. So the big thing is, the two things are getting the barriers in the school and on the desks, and getting the desks in the school. So if I just commit to getting the desk in the school, at least I'm halfway there.
Yeah.
So
when do you want the barriers here by?
When I know that there's no other way that I can.
No, I mean, if you're
Then when I know I can actually do it. Like,
yeah,
I'm not getting a definitive answer that even once I get the barriers that I can have kids in school from DOH. Because I've asked the question 4 times and I've never gotten yes.
CDC Sunday that they were doing starting today.
Right.
So we've been in a week, they say 3 feet.
So then it takes 3 feet from CDC to DOH, New York State. So it's like a week for that and another week or 2. So if they go, so that's why I'm thinking the smart thing for us to do is plan to get the desks in over break. If we're really committed to bringing kids back, and as long as we can do it, because I think we can do that and still just move the desk thing. I think there's ways we can do it.
yeah, if you don't use them all, you don't use them all. They're there.
They're there. Now, once they're there, now my only rate limiting step is getting the barriers if I need them. Or if they go, say, 3 feet in a mask, then we're ready to go. And we can rock and roll whenever we want with them. So I think that's the smart thing to do, to get the desks ready, but not to order the barriers. Let's wait and see a little bit. I think ordering the barriers is premature.
Even if they say 3 feet, you think they're running into transportation issues, and bring all the kids in now, they still wouldn't be able to sit together.
I think they're probably going to have to relax both things. They're gonna let them, I think they're gonna let more kids ride the buses too when they do the 3 feet. 2 to a seat when possible, 1 to a seat when possible, probably.
Oh, no, I got.
And
I
then
think it needs it.
they'll let us go too.
Is that right?
But what will happen, and this is what Scott was getting at with DOH in our conversation about quarantining, is as soon as we start to let our groups get bigger, the one exposure is gonna cause a larger quarantine. Right, the more they mix, the bigger the quarantine. So,
They talk about that potentially, obviously, potential change as well, all the quarantine rules.
Sure.
All that's coming, all that's applying as well.
right, is then that's what when the 3 feet thing, I tried to explain to people that this 3 feet works until it doesn't, until there's a problem, and then you're gonna have like 1,700 kids quarantined, or 17, but 40, if there's 44 on the bus, that's a big group. And if that's just the bus, and then if they're in 2 classes, then that's another potential 10 to 20, so it's like, so you can end up with 60, 70 kids quarantined at a time from one positive case if you have a full 44 bus and 2 or 3 cohorts in the 10, 12. So the more kids the more density you get, the bigger the quarantines will be, unless the contact changes. Right. So that's what I say to people, it's complicated. The reason we built the systems we built is because we reverse engineered the quarantining from the beginning to say, we don't want quarantines to impact large numbers of kids if at all possible. And the way you do that is you just restrict the heck out of how much mixing you do. As soon as we let go of that, we let go of some of that freedom of that. When you look around, the other thing you gotta be careful of is Herkimer Central School District did not give kids a choice to come or not come. They had to either come or have a medical excuse not to. So we have 90%, well, 95% more percent of our kids are in person because there was only a handful remote for both buildings medical. So some school districts gave the choice, most. So when they say they're 100% in person, well, they're 100% of the people that want to be in person. So you got to be careful of the wording. So they may, if a school district right now only has 60% of their kids that want to come back, well, yeah, they can say that we're now 100% in person for those that choose, but there's still only 60% of the kids in the school. So you got to be careful with what's being said out there and what's really happening in those schools and how many kids are actually in person. Because most people are going to be a little bit reticent to say, until the guidelines are really firmly 3 feet, yes, you have to come back. You see what I mean? Like, I've been telling people I'm going to keep everybody 6 feet apart. I need to have solid reasoning from the DOH, and everybody's got to be on the same page. Yeah, this is okay. All the scientists say, yeah, this is okay. We can do this. I think it's okay. You think it's okay. Now we just got to get a collective. It's okay from the organizations that are above us now. So we could have another meeting if the regulations change, probably. And I think we should meet as a board before kids come back in if we make a decision. Even if they change the rule to 3 feet, I think we need to have a discussion, public discussion about it before we do it. Is that fair? But structurally, what we'll do on our end is we'll try to get as ready as we can so that if we become allowed to do it and we build the school community support, or family support to do it, we're ready to do it as soon as possible. Because gosh, it would be great to be in person every day for the last quarter, K-12, and have outside sports going on and people there watching baseball games and softball games, and they still have masks on, so it's not quite normal, but it's getting closer. That'd be awesome. I think we'd all love that. But I want to do it right. I don't want to create fear. I don't want to make people feel like they're being forced to do something that they don't feel comfortable with. So we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that I'm not getting squishy answers from DOH that they're saying, yes, you can do this. CDC, yes, you can do it. SED, yes, you can do this. This is what we're all going to do. We're going to do it. And if there's issues, we'll make adjustments. Because we could always go back to this. All right? We know we can do it now. Any questions? And I'll do the structural stuff behind the order. I'll get quotes that I need to match. I'll get offsetting quotes so I get the lowest one. And then I'll get Jim on how long does it actually take to install one. So I'll do a lot of the mechanical work so that I know exactly how much time I need to do barriers if that's the route we go.
I just talked about unfolding stuff like that.
Yeah, but you're unfolding 500 of them. So it might take like the man hours for, if it's you and your kids, it's 10 minutes. But when I try to do it for a whole school, it actually might take, 80 man hours or 40 man hours to get person hours, sorry, to get it all done. So, and it's all easy until you try to do it, and then you order it from Wayfair, and it's like 70 pieces to the 3-piece thing. It's like, all right, my jokes are no fun. I think that was it for my presentation. Diane, did you have anything for us?
No, I'm good. I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay. Did that pop back up? I'm just sleep. Log back in. First thing up for us is high-risk sports. Looking for approval of football.
Do we approve dates in that, or is it just approving?
You're approving the sport, the dates are going to be set by the league section.
I'll make a motion.
Just thing in second.
Yeah, motion second. Discussion on that item. All those in favor? 6-0.
Looking for a motion on cheerleading.
Got a motion on that.
We discussed that one. Just a question about capacity levels at with 4 teams being there.
Sure. Do we have a motion in a second?
I'll second.
Who's the motion?
Michelle and Scott.
Yeah, I am a little bit worried about football games just generally with attendance and spacing in the stands, because we had soccer and it was lower numbers, or field hockey actually was in the football stadium. Soccer in the soccer stadium, and those are like probably 12 kids per team, 12 to 16 kids per team, and probably about 30 parents, so we're at 60. With football teams, you're gonna have probably closer to 30 to 50 kids on a team. So you could have between 60 and 100 parents from each team. The only thing that concerned me a little bit about cheer, sideline cheer, was that you introduced 12 more athletes and 24 more parents, which is another 60. So those events could be in the 150 to 200 people range, between maybe more, maybe 2 to 250, even though we're not letting in the general public, because you've got all the athletes on the field, which are probably between 60 and 100 kids, and then all the officials and everybody else. And now you're definitely talking probably around 100 people at least on the field. You've got potentially, 100, 150 parents for the football. Now you're adding in 60 for the cheer, so you're up well over 200. It's a big event.
150 parents for football.
Well, if you have 75 players, then they're 2 each. That's 150, 75. So let's say you have 40 and 30 from a football team, 30. We're about 35.
I think you're probably pushing 26, 27 kids on the team.
You think? Okay, well, whatever. I'm throwing it out there. We've had teams come with a large squad too. So it's not like just our team, it's the other team. So
you're going to get larger numbers,
Like
actually, because you have soccer kids that can outplay football that didn't have the opportunity.
we were guessing 30 something this year, just because of the oddity of the season.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a couple players that I think will play. We'll see. It might only be 26. In the past, we were almost not having a team, but it's been going on. So I'm just throwing, I don't know what our crowd size will be It just concerned me a little bit, but I'm not saying it's not doable.
So, I mean, within our high-risk plan, we talk about scheduling of 50% capacity at whatever location you're using. The county plan also defers back to the state, which refers to 50% capacity. So why are we even restricting to 2? Why don't we know what our 50% number is?
Because 2 is like the rule that we set for outside events. That's like the section rule too, I think. 2 per parent.
It's the what section? What I'm playing in the section.
In the state, I think in the state is 2 per parent, 2 per athlete. The capacity, it's not about capacity, it's for extracurricular athletics, it's 2 adults per child.
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
it was
for
next.
soccer.
We didn't make that one up.
Yeah.
From the county. That one came from the state. But you're never gonna get to, they say 50%, this is a complicated thing now. So they can tell you a restaurant can be 75% capacity with 6 foot social distancing. They can't do it. Because you can't get 6 foot social distancing and have 75% capacity. So I can not only, they can say I can have 50% of my capacity as long as I can do 6 foot social distancing, but I can't do that. So it's like, some of the things that they put out are like completely impossible. But the two per parent is something that I can go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure that didn't even come from us. That's in the NISPA guidelines. 2 per athlete, two adults per athlete.
So if we took the 50% and the 6 foot, like how many do we think capacity wise we could actually fit in the stadium?
The 6 foot is probably, I think 150 is.
So if you add cheer, now you're talking 200 plus spectators. Right?
Maybe.
Now you've got technically four.
We'll have to figure it out. I just don't know what it's gonna look like. Yeah.
That was my concern. So you're talking about a lot of people not.
It will be a large event. I mean, they're usually, open, a football game in Herkimer or in Kansas or wherever it's a big crowd. It's a crowded event. Even with 2 per play, that's still a crowded event. A lot of times there's more kids in the field by the play stuff than there is in the stadium. I think we will have to figure it out. I'm not telling you no. I'm just saying we're worried about capacity with just the football players, but we have to figure it out. Whether we have to use the little stands too, and potentially do some other stuff without the seating, with like portioned off like triangle squares by the fence. Only 2 people in this. We're going to figure it out. Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion about that? All those in favor? All those opposed? 5-1.
Volleyball.
Make a motion on that. Michelle, second. Any discussion on volleyball?
That'd just be the amateur school.
Yep. Just like basketball.
Would it be the same spectator rules that we're running with basketball, given it's indoor, there's no spectators?
Yeah. We aren't doing spectators for any of the indoor sports for the agreement that we set with the county. So we'll live stream like we're doing for.
What do you mean by the agreement we did with the county?
The agreement that the schools that the county health department set up for indoor high-risk sports, that there were no spectators.
But you know that conflicts with what their plan is to what our specific school plan is.
What do you mean?
The county plan allows for spectators. The school plan does not.
You mean just Herkimer?
I don't know what other schools are doing, but our school plan conflicts with the county. Because the county plan only defers back to the state, which says 2 spectators per person.
No, but the plan, you can have spectators indoors, but the county plan meaning the county schools put together for our league, for our county pod.
I'm saying what the county put out, what we distributed, whatever was the first part of the thing. Whatever the county sent to, the county's plan refers back to the state, which is a two-person.
Right.
Our school then restricts indoor with no respect.
No, the whole county does. Every school in the county was participating.
Every school in the county, but that's what I'm saying, why do our schools conflict with the county?
That was, I don't think it conflicts. I mean, I don't think so.
But if one says one thing and one says another, that's a conflict, and that's exactly what happened.
I don't think so.
I'll highlight it and send it to you tomorrow.
You mean the county press release versus?
There's a county plan to return to athletics. Then our school put together
The county plan is bigger than just school athletics. The county plan is for like biddy ball too and all that other stuff.
What I'm saying is the county plan allows for it. The county plan refers to the state, and the state allows for it.
The county plan for return to athletics, but when we went with DOH and our school physicians, the schools.
Right, that's my point. So the schools further limited the county plan.
Right, but we have to deal with school physicians too, not just the county. So it's like,
So it's a school decision, that's why I'm asking why are we, there's a point. So are we gonna get back the spectators inside? It's not a county decision, it's a school decision.
well, it's not this school's decision though. It's an agreement with all the schools, like we all agreed to do it this way. It wasn't like Herkimer agreed to say that we agreed that if we were gonna do indoor sports, there wasn't gonna be any spectators. As a group, as a league.
Yeah. I just don't
So
know why
if
we're
we-
further
if we-
restricting what the county
so-
plan tells us to do.
Well, that's, I don't know, I think, so
I was
you,
just questioning, I don't oppose it. I actually like the idea of not having,
Yeah,
I
So-
have people in the elementary school.
so if you think, so you think that, so there were schools that didn't want to do this at all. One of the selling points for indoor sports was no spectators. So like, it isn't biddy ball, it isn't rec soccer, it isn't little league, it isn't any of those things. It's something that's mandatory for like people to be here. We're not, like we have a higher level of restriction than all those other schools. So the county writes a plan for everything. And then schools who have required participation and have kids coming here and have like a higher responsibility to look at it. And we vetted it through school physicians. It's a conversation with DOH about what's a good thing here. So I think they can write a plan for everything, and then we can write it however we want underneath that we think works for our whole region to give people confidence in bringing sports back. So I think if we didn't have that decision back in February, there would have been schools that wouldn't have participated at all, probably. I think, but I could be wrong. I mean, I know you don't believe it, but there were people where there were schools where like, you're gonna bring COVID to my school. Because, there's schools that have had very few cases in our county. And, other schools have had more cases. And there's a perception that when people come in from outside that it's gonna do that. And when we were making all these decisions, we were just coming off of 5, 10, 15% positivity rates. So we're in a different spot now. So we can all look back now and say, well, 2020 hindsight that, yeah, maybe we all knew we would be here. But I don't think we're still in a position necessarily to say that everything's.
I didn't say that, I'm just telling you that it's going to conflict with the county plan. So I'm not speculating what.
So I would say that if the county said, you as a restaurant can have 75% capacity and I choose to have 50%, I'm not in conflict with the county plan. That's where we disagree.
Right.
So your statement that it's a conflict is wrong. It would be a conflict if I said I want to have 4 people per kid, because that'd be a conflict with.
Yeah, just clarifying that the schools made the decision.
Correct, but it's not in conflict.
Well.
So conflict would be if we disagreed and violated their rule. That they say as a DOH that you can't have 2. The conflict would be if I did more than that.
So
But
the
if I
correct
said
statement
no-
is the schools are just restricted to the county plan.
Right, there you go. Right, but it's not just this school.
Well, I didn't say that either.
Oh. Okay. Volleyball, motion?
I think we have a motion in a second, right? I'm just looking for a vote. All those in favor? 6-0.
Staffing recommendations?
Okay, I think we gave up, bring those to 50%.
So we have a motion from Rich, second from Scott to table staffing. All those in favor? 6-0.
CPSC resolution?
Motion.
That's Michelle, second by Diane. All those in favor? 6-0.
Approval of the amended district-wide and building level safety plan resolution. This is the pandemic plan that we discussed at the hearing.
So this is brings it to,
This just finalizes the,
We get a motion on that. Scott, second by Rich. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? 6-0.
Frank J. Basil Library proposition.
Get a motion on that. Michelle, second. Rich? Any discussion on that?
that's just to keep them on our, what is that budget process, right? But what our whole process.
Yeah, every year we have to, because they're a school district, like, they're in our district, so they represent the whole district, so they're part of our, we collect their taxes for them, essentially. We manage their election for their board and all of that.
All those in favor? 6-0.
If you get a chance, you should go over and look at it. The library is pretty cool
Should be open.
when it's open. Motion on appointment of election workers.
Get a motion on that. Rich, second. Diane? All those in favor? 6-0.
Looking for a motion on the updated operation calendar. We made a couple of adjustments to that. They're minor.
Motion on that. Michelle, second. Diane? Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? 6-0.
Administrative reports. Who's up first?
Let's vote. Anybody have any questions from this vote?
Something that's not included, I just wanted to show you guys. Barb McCree did a writing task, which was a persuasive essay on designing a donut. And Barb reached out to the Cakery Cafe in Dallettsville and asked that if the kids wrote this persuasive essay, would they vote and make the donut? So the kids, once the kids found that out, they were super excited. So they all wrote their persuasive essay and had to draw what their donut would look like. And they are featuring Alina Hutchinson, one, and they're featuring her donut in the cafe for the next 2 weeks. So I just thought that was really nice, and they were all, so I had those, and
You guys get some today?
30 of them, yes. So she stopped and picked them up. So she was super excited, and here's some of the essays if you'd like to read them. I just thought that was really nice. The kids were really excited.
Couldn't spare 6 of them?
What?
You couldn't spare 6 of them?
Listen, no, we gotta. And it is clean, it's clean in the bag.
It's not gonna take all
So how has AIS been, since you've been working on it?
You know what, I think this year, because we're working with teachers who have not always been responsible for all the AIS reporting, and do they look at data? Absolutely, but I think now it's more in the forefront. So I think it's been good conversations, like today I met with individual kindergarten teachers to talk about individual students, to see who's met end of year benchmark, and those kids that have not met end of year benchmark, what are your instructional strategies so that they're on the trajectory to hit hit that grade level goal by the end of the year? And if they don't hit that, what is our plan? So we're meeting with every teacher to talk about those. Teachers meet in small groups all the time. This is nothing new, but I think it's more about reporting and tracking and writing reports. So I just think it's more responsibility on them versus they go out and the AIS teacher takes responsibility for all the AIS. Now it's the teacher's responsibility for all of them. And we have had kids who have met the benchmark and have exited a quote unquote AIS. That doesn't mean that their needs are not being met. It just means that the paperwork, they've met certain benchmarks so they don't have to be in AIS or in a different group. And just today we had 2 new kids enter who we thought maybe back when we met in like October, November, we're on the trajectory, and now they've sort of, I'll say flatlined out. So what are they doing instructionally for those kids so that they start moving in an upward trend?
Anybody else? Did the kids find out who leprechauns were?
Who the what?
Leprechauns?
St. Patrick's Day is bigger than Valentine's Day. It is insane. They were so excited. And the one kindergarten teacher said, well, what are you going to do if you catch them? Because you can't keep them in school. And the kid's like, I have no idea. How am I going to get them home? Like, it was just priceless. There was green glitter and toilet water and milk, and it was all over the place. Toilet paper, it was crazy. It was cute.
Sounds awesome.
Toilet water. Where's the toilet water?
So the leprechaun goes into the bathroom and they put like some coloring in the toilet.
Oh.
That's interesting.
Do you think the leprechaun got his COVID shot?
Doesn't matter to them.
He wasn't part of that grouping yet.
He's not eligible.
He's definitely over 65.
But if you're
Yeah,
over
he didn't have those comorbidities. Yeah.
If you're immortal, you don't need the shot, I guess.
Any other questions for us, Paul? Let's see who's up next. Mr. Masso's up next. Any questions for Mr. Masso?
In-person instrumental music instruction. How
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Do it.
So when does that start? How's it all going?
Well, we will do it gradually. We will start with one student at a time. It's not built into the day, so the lessons have to be scheduled out throughout a month. So it will be very slow. But Mr. Gordon is very eager, and there are some guidelines for it, and other districts are doing it. So we're ready to give it a try.
So it's going to be one student.
To begin with, yes, yes.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, just having one student at home doing lessons once a week, it really is way cool, because it's like personalized instruction. You would have to pay hundreds of dollars for these instructions, I'm telling you. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do on this end, to be able to, provide the feedback.
How was the lag time and sound quality though?
Well, because I have pretty decent internet, but it's real great. He has great internet here. Thankfully, he's not at his house. His house is really bad. So if you ever got remote, that would be bad.
I've heard that the group stuff is really hard for the lag and for like choruses and stuff like that. It's really super hard.
I mean, I guess it would be like any Google Meet or.
Yeah, but when you're trying to like harmonize,
Yeah.
it's like pretty hard to harmonize. It starts to get out of sync. Jeez.
I can say that I've been in, like, seeing him do lessons, and he's gotten creative in the fact of for that whole lag time and the difficulty in hearing the notes, he's reverted a lot to having kids move their cameras to be able to like watch their fingerings on the instruments instead, because he can definitely tell if that's accurate or not, and give them feedback on that. So he's definitely adapted to this environment. It's not easy for him. He's working hard at it.
I was gonna say, I pick up my kids every day and they are always, hey, how was school? And I get nothing. You guys did the pep rally thing and it was like normal. They didn't, the whole ride home, that's all I heard about was the pep rally. They loved it.
That's nice. I'm glad to hear that. I'll pass it on to student council organize those events. And it was really neat to be able to kind of feel the community that we haven't felt in a long time,
Yeah.
even if it was virtual. You know, you could see the other classrooms and that was super cool.
It's those small things that are making things feel more normal and
Yes.
bring them together again.
I noticed you adjusted where you put the artwork so that kids actually see it, because there's no rotation, so you had it by the front. Is that why you had it in the alcove, all that artwork, or is that?
Well, that's actually an ag project.
Or is it
So those are barn quilts that students made in AFNR.
so,
And we wanted to get them out so people could see what is happening over here in room 150.
but it's interesting when people use in different doors, it's like not, some people don't see any, some parts of the building ever do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that really added a lot of, I don't know, life to that lobby.
So I don't know if y'all got a chance to read about Ms. McCutcheon with New York State Teacher of the Year. We're rooting for her. So we've all really done our part. So hopefully she'll get to that next level.
Yeah.
So what happens from here?
So there's several rounds. The second round, she is individually responsible for responding to questions that will be vetted by whatever team assesses who's going to become Teacher of the Year for New York. And then the third round would potentially be a school visit where the judges come to the districts of the teachers in contention and I guess size them up that way, you know, with interviews with peers and assessing the environment and seeing the classroom. So those are some big hoops to get through, but I'm confident in her application. She certainly qualified for that. I mean, I could add today, she got a donation. Well, she had solicited a donation for our school for stewards to sponsor an activity. And she was awarded that grant too. So next meeting you'll have to accept that gift, but it's $500 towards this soup bowl project. So the kids will make a project and fill it with food using the money that stewards donated for that activity. So always just reaching out to the community, always thinking of new ideas.
So do you like present her for that? Or how does that work? You know what I mean, that initial?
For the process,
Yeah.
it took all of us. Mrs. McCutcheon had to apply, but also it had to be letters of recommendation from administrators, from colleagues, from board members, from parents, and signed off by the union president to be submitted. So it was quite the thing to pull together, but we got it all together and it was worth it.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else for Mr. Mosso? Really, I heard some squeals in the last day when the agenda went public about the spring musical.
Well, it's not a musical.
I know.
It's a spring production. And I hope there were squeals of joy that you heard.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
There was two different productions
Yeah,
on the table, or you're gonna do two different productions?
both, because they're both short productions. The idea was to involve as many students as possible, still keep grade levels separate so that one would be 8, 9, 10, the other would be 10, 11, 12. They're very flexible in the casting too, so we are hoping to involve as many students as we can in a COVID-friendly production, or two, actually.
Planning it inside and then revert to outside if we have to, is that what I understood?
The plan is to perform outside, really.
Oh, I
I mean,
see.
that's what the goal is.
One of the things is we can have more people at an outside production than we can have at an inside production.
So are we starting with that? Like, is there a need for that too? You know what I mean? We heard, well, to practice.
Yeah, they were in there.
try out. I'm not saying the practices can't go on inside, it's just that
And that's in the proposal too.
it's just,
But with 2 productions, you can keep the size down for each one, bring in small groups, keep everybody socially distanced, but also in your view, in the
in the
auditorium.
past, parents have gone to every show, like typically, that may not, like those kinds of things may or may not be possible this time. Like I think, we have to figure that all out. We'll see. We'll see.
There's a lot of enthusiasm for it.
I'm sure there is. I'll just be my old calm self over here and figure it out.
That's what we do.
I should plan a trip for that weekend.
Well, last weekend, I think you and I were standing on the wall and we were discussing whether or not we were gonna cancel the rest of the weekend, and then the DOH made it for us, so didn't matter.
Yeah.
The first night of the performance
Oh.
we actually had, and then the next nights we were like
Gotcha.
talking whether or not we were gonna have it.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back, that was like the last normal night
Yep.
of anything. Was that production?
Yeah.
That seems like a lifetime ago.
Pretty much. Next up is Mr. Abbey. Have anything for Mr. Abbey? I think that your awards, amazing. That was really great. I thought all of that was really well thought out.
It was definitely like a full team effort, you know,
Yeah.
working with the teachers, trying to decide what was most important to recognize at that point, and, you know, the recognition of good things, but more than anything, we really felt like it was time that we gotta get some motivation going, and really get that spark to finish the year strong. And it went really well. Kids responded well. Kids were very excited and appreciative of those efforts. So it was a really nice couple of days, a really busy couple of days. You know, normally with an award situation, you get to do everything once and all be together, but you know, it was quite a few renditions. So Mr. Paul and I had it down pat by day 3 after going through, 20 some odd classrooms. So it was most definitely worthwhile.
You gave a lot of students awards too, which is great, it's not that.
Yeah, and I think that was also really important, because since you had to do it broken out so much, it was important that at least like 1 to 2 kids were recognized for really solid efforts or character traits in each room, so that everybody got to see that recognition.
Any other discussion? I love the front window too.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
That was nice. You'd be amazed how hard that is for kids to do. It's hard to think about yourself in that manner. So that was a really nice lesson that went along with that from Mrs. Paul about positive self-image.
Memorandum of agreement.
Okay. So, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the MOA between Herkimer CSD and Herkimer Faculty Association regarding the athletic co-curricular activity compensation, and the superintendent to sign the contract on the board's behalf. We can make a motion on that.
I'll make the motion.
Michelle, second by Diane. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? 6-0. Is resignation. So this one, be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Herkimer Central School District does hereby accept the resignation of Ms. Brandy Bure from her Board of Education seat effective March 16, 2021. Get a motion on that. Rich, second by Diane. All those in favor? 6-0.
annual budget hearing. So we have, we have a motion on the budget hearing for Tuesday, May 5th at 6 p.m.
That's the hearing, the resolution is, or the votes,
It's okay. Oh, May 18th, yeah. Okay. So Scott, second by Michelle. Discussion on that? All those in favor? 6-0. I had an update, I tried to find it. Tomorrow night, there is a meeting with BOCES. It's an SBI workshop, if anybody wants to go to it. It's instructional shift 1 year into the pandemic. It's at 6 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting. The last one that I went to was real good. So this one, I can't remember the gentleman's name that's going to be running it, but this looks to be a real good workshop. This last month, no, actually a couple weeks ago, we had an executive board meeting for BOCES, and went really well. Everybody went around the room and discussed what their plans were for reopening, and I was like, we've been open since the beginning of the year. I don't know what everybody's talking about. So, and so everybody was, because this is for Oneida County too, and they're in Madison, they're talking about, oh, we're gonna open up and we're gonna have kids from K through 6 in. Good, that's great. And they discussed this coming year, this last year, they had the legislators, the senator and the legislator, the Senate. They had them separate days for meet and greet. So they're going to do that again this year. I thought that was really good. So if you have any questions for either side, they don't have to be kind of in the same room together. So they're going to do that again this year. They're going to still Zoom. Even if we do start going back to in-person meetings, they're going to have Zoom as well. So in case you can't go to a meeting up at OHM, you can still go to the meeting on Zoom. So that was really nice. So they're also planning on Zoom meetings for all the new board member informational sessions that you have to go to. So I want to be a board member. That's going to be Zoom meeting. All the budget is all going to be Zoom. So you don't have to do all that online anymore. You can actually do it through Zoom with our people, and that's really nice. So I thought that was a good plan. We have Mr. Vos is going to be stepping down from the BOCES board, and he asked Mr. Connolly if he was interested in being on the board, and he got back to me and he said that his health is of concern. So he wants to make sure that if there's anything in the future, any kind of reopening plan committees or anything like that, to consider him for it. But he won't be able to step up and be on the BOCES board. So if anybody wants to be on the BOCES board, April is the executive meeting. We have to have obviously a candidate to go to BOCES board. So if anybody's interested, just let me know. If nobody's interested, I'll probably just step up and be on the BOCES board.
What do you need one for each school district?
Yeah.
one of the advantages to doing this would be, it would be a relatively short term, because I think you would just complete the Dan Bose's term, which is probably only a year. So if you want to get a flavor for what happens over at BOCES, it'd give you a chance to get some real insights over there.
And theirs is, this is similar to ours, it's one meeting a month, and it's really not as intense as the school board. So if anybody's interested, just let me know.
I don't think anybody ever goes to BOCES board meeting, ever.
Next up is the future meeting dates.
we have April 14th for the regular board meeting.
Right, we agreed that if we need one for reopening, we would meet, because I do think, like I said earlier, we should have a conversation publicly about that before we do that. You guys have dates, do you want to talk about potential dates and today's the 17th, in the first week of April, perhaps, or many of you going away for break? So what about that first, let me pull up my calendar too. I'm asking you guys. What's 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight would be the first, right? Or not,
Now, the 31st of March.
so. Do the 31st, 1st or 2nd of April work for you guys? Because that might be a time frame. Or are you going over break? I'm here over break, so I don't care. So does that work for you guys over break, like April 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in there? Yeah. Because April 5th would be 2 weeks from the 19th. That might be enough. That's likely enough time for us to do what we need to do for the 19th if we know by then.
Because the kids return on the 12th.
But I don't really think it would be wise for us to do anything on the 12th with people traveling all over. Like, we could definitely see some quarantining going on from travel, from whatever, coming back in. So I think the smart move is the 19th for anything we do.
But have the meeting that.
But if we have the meeting the 5th, or the 5th, 6th, 7th, then we might have more knowledge at that point, somewhere in that range.
I can't do Tuesday, so.
Shoot for the 7th, Wednesday? 7th, for a potential meeting. I'm not gonna schedule it now. Let's,
At 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock? And the only point of that meeting would be to discuss reopening. Well, returning more kids in in-person instruction.
And we have April 14th for the next meeting. Okay. Good. So we have meeting evaluation by Ms. Fisher.
Hello, so I think everything went well. The information was sent to us ahead of time. It was online and available ahead of time, and it's a good meeting. Thank you.
I move to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing promotion, retention of personnel. The board may take action in public session after the executive session ends and the board returns to public session.
Motion, can you get a second? Rich? All those in favor? 6-0.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
Sure. Is that good, Diane? 5 minutes, we'll go over to executive.
Brian, I'm probably gonna have to move that to executive, aren't I? So Diane can be involved from